A warm welcome to day 2 of Seafood eConnect 2021, organized by Mars International, supported by Marine Stewardship Council, MSC. I'm Rosalind Sandra, Event Promotion Officer at Mars International. It's day 2 of Seafood eConnect 2021. We have two sessions. Session 3 on MSc certification and fishery improvement projects for sustainable seafood, and Session 4 on international seafood market trends and analytics. Now we have Session 3, which is exclusively themed on MSc certification and fishery improvement projects for sustainable seafood, presented by three speakers. I invite Edouard, Regional Director, Marine Stewardship Council, MSc South Europe, to give a session talk on Marine Stewardship Council certification, using markets to reward sustainable fishing. Mr. Edouard, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Rosalind, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me in this event. I'm Edouard, the Regional Director for South Europe, Africa, Middle East, and South Asia at the Marine Stewardship Council. I've been working for this organization for almost 13 years now, and I'm based in Paris, France. So before I start, let me share with you my screen and this presentation that you should be able to see now. Here it is. Thank you. So I'm going to tell you about our organization, the Marine Stewardship Council, and how we use markets to reward sustainable fishing. And first of all, I'm going to explain to you our role and our theory of change. Our mission is to use our eco-label and fishery certification program to contribute to the health of the world's ocean by recognizing and rewarding sustainable fishing practices, influencing the choices people make when buying seafood, and working with our partners to transform the seafood market to a sustainable basis. Our approach can be summarized by this circle that illustrates our theory of change. When a consumer buys a product with the blue label, or a company or a fishery gets certified to our standard, they become part of a virtuous cycle that catalyzes change in our oceans toward more sustainability. That's why MSc works with all stakeholders of the seafood industry and ocean conservation movement, as every part of this chain is part of the solution to end overfishing globally. At the heart of our program is our fishery standard to assess the sustainability of fisheries around the world. This standard meets best practice requirements of the FAO, ICIL, and also Global Sustainable Seafood Initiatives, the GSSI. It is based on three main principles. First one is the sustainability of the stock. It must be healthy and harvested at sustainable levels. Second principle is on the ecosystem impacts. It assesses the impact of the fishery on non-targeted species, on endangered, threatened, or protected species, on habitats. And the third principle is to assess the effectiveness of the management system in place in the fishery. And beyond these principles, specific performance indicators are defined and scored by independent certification bodies who will define if the fishery meets the standard or not. But before we go beyond, let's come back to why the MSc exists. The scale of the problems our oceans are facing is growing, and we need to take greater action to meet this scale. The Sophia report in 2020, from which these figures are extracted, has revealed that overfishing figures are still going the wrong direction, with more than a third of global fish stocks now overfished, while we also face a growing issue of climate change and continuous IUU fishing issue. Communities around the world rely on fish and seafood for their food security and livelihoods, and as the population grows, demand for fish and seafood grows. This exacerbates the already daunting task of feeding a global population that will be pushing 10 billion a generation from now. And in this context, our role in the global goal is more important than ever. The MSC's work contributes towards several of the UN Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, particularly Goal 14, Life Below Water, the aim of which is to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Now, what I'm going to tell you about now is the MSC impact. First, we are going to talk about the impact on the water, but later we are also going to talk about the impact on the market, because each of those are, of course, linked. So, MSC impact on the water in numbers. At the moment, 19% of all wild marine catch is engaged with the MSC, either certified or in assessment. More than 500 fisheries are engaged in the MSC program, of which 25 are suspended and 70 are in assessment. We have almost 2,000 improvements made by MSC certified fishery since the program began and up to the 31st of March 2021, when this report was produced. Here you see a map that can show you that more and more fisheries are choosing to join the program and have their sustainability independently verified by auditors. In 2021, there are over 500 fisheries from 55 countries that are MSC certified or in assessment. You can see on the map that the major part of the fisheries engaged in our program so far are located in the Northern Hemisphere, mainly in Europe and Northern America. But our impact in the Southern Hemisphere is growing, and it's a major objective for us. Many small-scale fisheries and fisheries from developing regions can find it hard to meet the complex requirements of the MSC fishery standard. But we are working hard to make our program more accessible. We want the MSC program to be accessible to all fisheries, irrespective of size or location. The number of small-scale fisheries and fisheries from developing world engaged with the MSC program rose in 2021. And this is really welcome, because according to the FAO, small-scale fisheries provide approximately half the global seafood catch each year and over 90% of all jobs in the fishing industry. By example, the Fish for Good project is a flagship of how we are approaching this challenge. Working in partnership with others, the project is focused on supporting fisheries in South Africa, Mexico, and Indonesia. Improvements and capacity building focus on areas such as reducing bycatch, limiting habitat impacts, and rebuilding fish stocks. My colleague Marriott will talk about it in more details later. Our In Transition to MSC ITM pilot program, launched in 2019, also supports fisheries committed to achieving certification. The program offers a way of independently verifying a fisheries progress on an annual basis, helping them to stay on track to achieve the improvements needed to meet the MSC standard. Fisheries in the ITM program are also eligible to apply for financial support to carry out improvements from the MSC's Ocean Stewardship Fund. As of March 2021, the program included 10 fisheries, 4 of which had joined in the previous quarter. Now, what is very important to note is that certification is only the beginning. Not only does the blue tick tell consumers their seafood has come from an MSC certified fishery, but buying it supports fishers who are leading the way in sustainability. Statistical analysis of fisheries scores show that they improve their practices as they stay in the program. To be certified as sustainable, fisheries must achieve a minimum average score on their performance against 3 principles of the MSC standard: sustainable stocks, environmental impacts, and effective management. These 3 principles are made up of a number of criteria, and the MSC standard insists that where an individual criterion is below the minimum standard, a condition is placed. A fishery must then implement a plan of action to make improvements that will bring it to global best practice. Consequently, the average score of fisheries increased significantly between their initial certification and when they are reassessed after 5 years. This enables our program to catalyze improvements even after certification. The next slide summarizes the kind of improvements we've seen so far. Fisheries around the globe have made almost 2,000 improvements as a result of being in our program. This includes 372 in the last 3 years alone, consisting of 134 improvements benefiting endangered, threatened, protected species, reducing bycatch, 101 improvements benefiting stock status and harvest strategies, 71 improvements benefiting fishery management, governance, and policy, 66 improvements benefiting ecosystems and habitats. Now, we are going to focus a bit more on something that is really linked to the fishery improvements. It's also the MSC impact in the market. Every 2 years, we conduct a survey to study the consumption behavior of shoppers around the world and the awareness of our program. More than 20,000 people in 23 countries have been interviewed in 2020. The result is very interesting. 1/3 of them put the health of the ocean or declining fish populations in the top 3 environmental concerns. And sustainability now ranks 3rd in the motivation for consumers to choose their fish, even before price. 46% of the consumers have already seen the blue eco label, and 76% of them trust it. And these figures are constantly growing. So it's really interesting because you can link it with the amount of seafood sold with the MSC label that has increased by 6% last year, including an additional 50,000 tons in the US, up 54%, 20,000 tons in France, up 16%, 10,000 tons in Italy, up 30%, and 13,000 tons of tuna alone in Germany. More than 20,000 products with the blue MSC label are now available worldwide, a 2% increase on last year's report figure. The last year has also witnessed a significant increase in the amount of blue-tick frozen food and canned goods, which were both popular during the COVID-19 lockdowns in many countries. But the pandemic led to a drop, of course, in food service sales and sales of wet fish at fish counters, who suffered especially during the COVID situation. It is very encouraging that during a time of huge global uncertainty, neither consumers nor brands rolled back on their commitment to sustainable seafood, which is increasingly available in different markets around the world, as you can see on these slides, showing you the number of products available to consumers with the MSC label. You can see that globally there is a constant growth since we started to operate. And you can see the split between the different countries, and that Germany is our market where MSC label is the most popular. But then we also have markets like France, United States, United Kingdom, and Netherlands showing the way, and many other markets that are constantly growing over time. Another important point to note as well is that there is many different types of products bearing the MSC label at the moment. And it's very interesting to see that on each market, depending on the type of product they use the MSC label. Now that we've talked very briefly about our impacts on the water and on the markets, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of what the MSC is looking ahead. First, we regularly review our fishery standard to ensure it continues to set the bar for sustainable fishing by reflecting widely accepted new science, management practices, and stakeholder concerns. The pandemic pushed us to do more online engagement than previously planned, with encouraging results. In developing our last fishery standard in 2015, we received 67 responses from 36 organizations. This time, our 5 initial surveys received 268 responses. We also ran 11 virtual workshops with over 200 participants, representing over 150 organizations from 33 countries. Building on this, in May 2020, we launched our first virtual fishery standard review conference. Over 400 people attended, including NGOs, fisheries, certification assessors, academic scientists, government officials, retailers, and journalists. Participants had the opportunity to hear and ask questions about all 16 projects that could result in changes to the MSC fishery standard. These projects are looking at areas such as harvest strategies, gear loss, and ghost fishing, clarifying requirements for endangered, threatened, and protected species, and prevent shark finning. We will continue the consultation process over the coming months, and we'll be carrying out impact assessment of all the proposed changes. The draft version of the new standard will be released in early 2022, when our stakeholders will have the chance to review it, making sure that the changes are clear and that the updated version enables further progress in sustainable fishing practices. Another topic of importance is how we support oceans teeming with life with the OSF, which means the Ocean Stewardship Fund, with which we support scientists and environmentalists working with fisheries to deliver the improvements needed to achieve global best practice. It is funded by royalties from products carrying the blue tick in shops and restaurants around the world. 5% of all royalties from certified labeled products are reinvested in this fund. And at this day, £1.3 million has already been awarded. Funding, by example, supported the fishery improvement project for the deep sea shrimp fishery in Kerala, India. Lack of research means the fishery has yet to prove its sustainability. By funding a stock assessment led by WWF India, we hope to create a reference point for harvest control rules and better management. And the goal is to attain full MSC certification by 2025. The OSF third call in September 2021 focuses on habitat impacts and endangered, threatened, and protected species. Now, I'd like to thank you for your attention to this presentation, and I will let my colleague Michael Marriott go a bit deeper in our program of pre-certification and pathway to certification. And thank you again to the organizers for inviting me in this event. And I hope I can have the chance to meet you in person soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Edouard. The next talk will begin in a minute. I invite Michael Marriott, Program Manager, Africa, Middle East, and South Asia, Marine Stewardship Council, to give a session talk on supporting wild capture fisheries on the pathway to sustainability. Mr. Michael, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Rosalind, and thank you and good day to all the participants who are joining this session today. My name is Michael Marriott. I represent the Marine Stewardship Council as the Program Manager for Africa, Middle East, and South Asia. And I'm going to use this opportunity today really to talk about the MSC as a wider program beyond certification eco-labeling. I've been with the Marine Stewardship Council for over 10 years now, based in the Cape Town office in South Africa. During this time, I've mainly experienced the program from the perspective of fisheries that are not yet in a position to be fully certified, or fisheries that are selling into markets that demand for sustainability isn't at the point that would push them towards certification. And that's the situation for many fisheries around the world. You would have heard earlier that around 15% or so of the world's fisheries are what we would normally term engaged in the MSc program. That is, they are certified or in the process of becoming certified, which means they've had their practices independently scrutinized against the MSc standard, and they're answerable to global markets and other stakeholders. And the achievements of these fisheries should be celebrated. We live in a world now where increasingly fish stocks are subject to overfishing. The number of fish stocks are in decline. And it's remarkable to think that that fisheries in the MSc program are fishing on stocks that are moving in the opposite direction. So it does provide us with a ray of hope. Those gains, of course, reflect the fact that many of these fisheries exist within very strong management regimes, but it also reflects the MSc's theory of change, where fisheries in the MSc program are driven to continuous improvement, both through the conditions of their certification and also through the changes to the MSc standard over the years as it adjusts to track modern thinking around sustainability. Importantly, though, we do need to recognize that these fisheries are concentrated in the global north, in developed countries, and selling to existing environmentally sensitized markets. And not all fish entering those markets is from these certified fisheries. So what does happen to the MSc's theory of change when all the fisheries that are able to be certified currently are already in the program? Of course, recognizing and rewarding good practice is what certification is all about. But this should be seen only as part of a mechanism to provide incentive for fisheries policy. As demand for certified seafood increases, we need to be able to respond to this need with fisheries coming forward into the program. So what we want is that we continue to build the stream of fisheries entering the MSc program so that markets can grow, recognition of the eco-label can grow, and the number of fisheries that are operating sustainably around the world can grow. Because rarely 15% isn't enough. We know that if managed properly, the oceans can contribute to a number of positive benefits, including poverty eradication, sustained economic growth, and the contribution to food security. By recent calculations, the suggestion is that if just wild capture fisheries were sustainably managed, they could generate up to 60 million tons more catch per year than we currently catch. This would meet the protein requirements of an additional 72 million people, which, looking at the forecasting for population growth, is going to be an important consideration going forward. So it's not the MSc's vision only to recognize the best fisheries, but rather to go beyond this and move other fisheries towards better fishing practices so that they can also be amongst the best fisheries. Because the oceans can't teem with life if only the top 10 to 20% of fisheries are being pushed to improve. So at its core, the MSc is a change program. We recognize that some fisheries face significant obstacles in meeting our sustainability requirements. In particular, this applies to small-scale fisheries and fisheries in the global south. And we've been actively supporting accessibility issues and fisheries on their path to sustainability since the MSc fisheries standard was first launched over 20 years ago. It's an important part of our work, but it's seldom visible, probably in large part because our external communications and the figures we tend to present focus on fisheries that are formally engaged in the MSc program, where their performance has already been publicly assessed against the MSc standard. When we look at these figures in relation to the engagement of small-scale fisheries or fisheries from the global south, looks like very little is happening, but it's only part of the story. So according to the FAO, small-scale and global south fisheries provide about half the world's seafood catch each year and over 90% of jobs in fishing. There are some specific challenges that exist amongst those fisheries, and particularly amongst those that are wanting to benefit from certification schemes like the MSc. Those sort of issues include issues around data deficiency, stemming perhaps from a lack of capacity for data collection and monitoring. And this leads to an inability to accurately assess stock levels or stock status relative to reference points that we use in our standard reference points, such as the maximum sustainable yield or point of recruitment impairment. It also impacts on the ability to be able to track the impacts of fishing on other species and habitat. Then there are also challenges in fishery management, often also stemming from capacity. These might include lack of harvest strategies and control rules, inadequate processes and consultation and decision-making, inadequate capacity to ensure compliance. And then finally, of course, there are cost issues. There are costs, directly costs for certification, but also the cost of implementing measures to address the shortcomings in data collection, management, and compliance. So the MSc developed the concept of the pathways to sustainability, essentially an umbrella term for our activities that are undertaken in the pre-MSc or pre-certification space, but that still reflect progress towards MSc. The pathway concept introduces a number of objectives that go beyond recognition of already well-managed fisheries. And these objectives include that of providing a mechanism to increase the number of fisheries that could eventually become certified, putting in place a framework to support activities that contribute to the sustainability of fisheries that may or may not consider becoming certified, and thirdly, creating a framework to engage and support the government and other stakeholders in their efforts to ensure sustainable management. The pathways to sustainability component of our work comprises basically two elements, what we term pathway projects and what we group together as pathway tools. Our pathway project is basically any project that uses the MSc pre-certification tools in a strategic way to engage with multiple fisheries at the same time. And it would typically look like this, a project that follows 5 key stages, the first of which would be mapping, normally with a scoping review and information collection so that we can identify priority fisheries that will be the focus of the pathway project. That then progresses into stage 2, where those priority fisheries would undergo a pre-assessment, essentially a gap analysis against the MSc standard to identify where they might fall short of the standard. Stage 3 involves development of an action plan to address the specific issues that have been raised in stage 2. Stage 4, implementation of that action plan. At this stage, it would normally be considered a fishery improvement project. And then at stage 5, the completion of the improvement project and the decision with the fishery to go through full assessment or not. Individual fisheries, as well as multi-fishery, multi-stakeholder projects like the pathway projects, also supported by a comprehensive suite of improvement tools, or what we call pathway tools, as well as capacity building and an MSc funding program called the Ocean Stewardship Fund, all of which are publicly accessible and can be used to deliver effective tips. The term pathway tools that we use refers to the suite of our pre-certification templates and guidance, largely that are available to support pathway project practitioners and stakeholders involved in the pathway project as they move the fishery through the stages that we saw in the previous slide. In broad terms, the tools can be grouped under those that are to do with the MSc standard, so developed around the technical content of the standard, those that provide guidance on the process, so they focus on the procedural elements involved in implementing pathway projects, ensuring quality and consistency of fishery improvement projects. And then lastly, the programmatic tools, which combine several tools together and evolve to be comprehensive initiatives. Our first pathways tool was the MSc pre-assessment template, launched in 2009. Marked the beginning of a more structured way of working with fisheries that were not yet ready for assessment. Pre-assessment, you would have heard the word probably used quite a lot. It's essentially an independent review of fishery against the MSc fishery standard to gauge whether it's likely to pass and to identify areas where it might fall short. It's normally an important step in the initial engagement of any fishery that decided to go for MSc assessment, despite it being non-mandatory. Important because it's confidential, or it can be confidential. And this allows fisheries to gauge where they are without exposing themselves to wider stakeholder scrutiny before they've had the opportunity to correct any issues that come up. What it does is it provides a baseline determination of the fisheries performance relative to the MSc standard and against each of the performance indicators that are detailed in the MSc standard. Each of those performance indicators is given a draft score, and the potential obstacles are specifically identified, the barriers to certification. Template that this is recorded to then provides a framework for a fishery that wants to progress through to the formal fishery improvement project. So by formalizing this pre-assessment process and standardizing how scoring was done, we opened the door to many fisheries to engage with our program, and it did lead to a large increase in FIPs that were based on the MSc standard. It also created a dilemma for us. By that time in 2009, a number of markets were starting to recognize the value of certification, but they were also including FIPs in their sourcing policies, but there was no ownership of the term FIP. There was nothing to define what constituted a FIP, and there was no way to independently verify whether improvements were in fact taking place or whether these FIPs were making a difference on the water. So to address this, the MSc created the definition of credible. And in this sense, we look at fisheries that have had a gap analysis or a pre-assessment, so they've been benchmarked against the MSc standard. They have an action plan in place to address each of the issues that was identified. They have regular reporting and an independent verification and assurance mechanism. Importantly, they are fisheries with a time frame or time standard associated with them. So they must be within 5 years of being able to be MSc certified, and they must have made an upfront commitment to pursue MSc certification once they complete the FIP. These requirements are all used by the MSc in assessing whether a FIP is then eligible to proceed into our in transition to MSc or ITM program. This then affords them additional support benefits such as access to our ocean stewardship funding. But the main reason really for developing these criteria was to be able to identify which FIPs were making good progress from those that were somewhat more static. And key to good progress is the development of a suitable action plan that addresses the specific needs of the fishery against the shortcomings that were identified in the pre-assessment. For this, we have the MSc's action plan template, which on its own is a useful tool, but it does need to be applied by the right group of people. One of the cornerstones of the pathway to sustainability is collaboration, and the action plan uses a template to help to attribute responsibility, to identify which resources are needed and where those resources must come from, and attribute responsibility, as well as SMART objectives. By SMART, I mean specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. That will then achieve the desired outcomes against the specific performance indicators that were identified as shortcomings in the pre-assessment. That, of course, necessitates working with a wide range of stakeholders who might include government actors, researchers, fisheries, non-government organizations, and even supply chain actors. We create an enabling environment for a more coordinated approach to improving fishery performance. It also may involve a degree of upskilling and developing capacity for further engagement in the process. And to this end, we also continue to deliver capacity building to stakeholders across the world. We've recognized for a long time that local organizations, in particular environmental NGOs, are often very well established within coastal communities, and they bring their own experience and understanding of the region to improvement and pathway projects. They also often take a very holistic approach that might include working to safeguard livelihoods and food security as well as conservation. So while sustainable fishing is a key piece of this puzzle, it's not always their main focus. We want to empower those participants through our capacity building with the knowledge to build sustainability elements into the work that they do as well. The capacity building program as it stands offers 3 different levels of training, starting at level 1, which promotes a basic understanding of the MSC standard and how to use our improvement tools, through level 2, which is a much more comprehensive look at how scoring is done against performance indicators, and right through to level 3, where we look to strengthen regional expertise and enable stakeholders to become technical consultants in the MSC program. When we put all of these elements together, the pathway projects, the pathway tools, and the capacity building, the picture starts to look different. It's clear that while 14–15% of fisheries may be certified in assessment, there is much more progress towards assessment by fisheries that have not yet proceeded beyond the pre-certification space. There's also a very clear pathway to engage with many. I couldn't finish a presentation on MSC support for fisheries on their pathway to sustainability without also mentioning the Ocean Stewardship Fund in a bit more detail. The OSF is a fund where MSC has committed 5% of the royalty fees earned from the sale of products that carry the MSC Blue Eco label to support fisheries at all stages of their pathway towards sustainability. That would be fisheries that are already certified and are looking to address certain conditions of their certification, or it can be fisheries that are in PIPs within the in transition to MSC program, or projects associated with either of those fisheries research projects. To date, the OSF has awarded around 35 grants, totaling £1.3 million, and we're currently supporting 24 active projects around the world. It's hoped that the impact of this will contribute to efforts to increase the number of MSC certified fisheries and ultimately to contribute to the delivery of the UN's Sustainable Development Goal, number 14, life below water. So thank you again for listening. I do hope this will have gone some way to generating further interest in the wider MSC program. There is a lot of information on our website on all these elements, and I'd invite you to explore some of the initiatives that I've touched on, or of course to contact us directly if you wish to follow up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. The next talk will resume in a minute. I invite Dr. Sunil Mohamed, retired principal scientist, CMFRI, and presently the chair of Sustainable Seafood Network of India, to give a session talk on state of wild capture fisheries in India and the role of the Marine Stewardship Council in driving progress or change on the water. Dr. Sunil Mohamed, handing over to you.
Thank you, Rosalind, for your kind introduction. I'm Sunil Mohamed. I work with the Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute in India for past 30 years, and currently I'm the chair of the Sustainable Seafood Network of India. Today I'm going to talk about the state of India's wild capture fisheries and the way in which the Marine Stewardship Council's certification scheme has influenced it. So the title of my talk is The State of Wild Capture Fisheries in India and the Role of the Marine Stewardship Council in Driving Change in this particular region. If you look at India, the seafood consumption is actually quite low compared to the global average. The current average is about 6.5 kilograms per person per year. But if you look at the different states in India, you can see that the range is very big, from a very low, less than 1 kilogram to about 100 kilograms in the islands of Lakshadweep and Andaman Nicobar Islands. So consumption of fish is mainly limited to the coastal areas. If you look at the profile of Indian fisheries, we have about 7,500 kilometers of coast, an exclusive economic zone of 2 million square kilometers, continental shelf of 500,000 square kilometers, and we have about 3,477 fishing villages. The marine fisher population is estimated as 3.8 million, and the active fishers number about 1 million. We have quite a large infrastructure in terms of landing centers, more than 1,200 landing centers, out of which 6 are major fishing harbors, 27 minor harbors, and the number of vessels in the fishery is also quite big. We have 42,600 mechanized vessels, 95,000 motorized vessels, and about 25,000 non-motorized vessels. The gross value of the fisheries is estimated as $28.3 billion US, and the exports amount to about $6.5 billion US, out of which about 35% is marine capture. The export volume is nearly 1 million ton, and it forms about 3% of India's total exports. The markets are mostly, domestic markets are mostly 81% fresh, 5% frozen, 6% dry, and 5% as fish meal. And the share in the gross value added is about 1.24%, and share in agriculture GVA is 7.5%. The estimate of marine fish landings shows a graph which is climbing all from 1950 onwards, when it was about 500,000 tons, and it has touched about 4 million tons in 2012, and is now stabilized around 3.5 to 4 million tons. The annual growth rate in marine fish production is positive for India if you look at a decadal growth rate compared to the global growth rate, which is now turned negative. Some of the features which make India's fisheries very resilient is most of the species that we exploit have high fecundity. They spawn continuously, having extended spawning season with pulses. Most of the fishes have fast growth rate. There's an abundant spawning stock biomass, quick turnover of generations, and very short lifespan. This makes the fisheries much resilient. And this is the graph showing you the seafood exports. It's been climbing from about $1 billion US in 95-96 to nearly $7 billion US in 1920. The major resources that India's fisheries accounts for are oil sardine, mackerel, cephalopods, pinnate prawns, ribbon fish, threadfin breams, and other sardines and anchovies. So it's mostly a fisheries dominated by both pelagics as well as demersal resources. The exploitation is carried out by 3 major types of crafts: mechanized, motorized, and non-motorized. And the major gears are 5: trawl net, gill net, bag net, seines, and hooks and lines. And there are more than 30 craft gear combinations, which makes the fisheries actually quite complex to manage. If you look at the sector-wise production, the mechanized sector accounts for more than 80%, motorized 17%, and the non-mechanized about 1.5%. The major gear is trawl, 54%, gill net, 12%, dole net, which is a kind of a bag net, fixed bag net, is about 9%, ring seines and purse seines more than 14%. Another important feature of India's marine fisheries is the high species diversity in catch, which some of the states in the lower latitudes like Tamil Nadu and Kerala accounting for nearly 400 to 500 species annually. As you go up in the latitude, the number of species decreases, but essentially this is a tropical area with a wide variety of species which are being exploited. Many of these species are also resilient and vulnerable. This shows a scatter plot of resilience and vulnerability scores for about 133 stocks, which comprise of teleos, elasmobranch, crustaceans, and mollusks. And what we see is that more than 100 of the 133 species are resilient yet vulnerable, and most crustaceans showed high resilience. So the question is, how do we manage a fisheries like as complex as ours, with high diversity in the fish taxa? So management is the activity of protecting the resource so that sustainable exploitation is possible, drawing on science, fishery science, including the precautionary principle, the well-known frog in the boiling pot, the burden of proof and the precautionary principle are explained in this diagram. A recent study on the status of fisheries management around the world shows India's position in this. It's not very high. So it actually evaluated the management on the basis of research, management, enforcement, socioeconomic, and stock status. India has an outlier in the sense research is pretty high, but management and enforcement are quite poor, and so also socioeconomics. A recent assessment of India's fish stocks, about 223 fish stocks were recently assessed, and it can be seen that about 34% are in the green, that is sustainable, whereas about 36% are overfished and about 26% are recovering. So, and if you further look into the ratios of the MSY to catch, biomass and effort, you can see that the ratios do not look very good. It has been decreasing. The effort over FMSY is actually increasing and the biomasses are decreasing. When you come to governance, fisheries governance, the Constitution of India divides it into two. One in the union list, that is the fisheries in the EEZ, that is fisheries outside of the 12 nautical mile, 12 to 200 nautical mile, and the state list, fisheries in the territorial waters within the 12 nautical mile. Most of these fisheries is open access. There's no restriction on entry. And as per international classification, almost all of them are small scale fisheries. And there are a number of laws and agencies which makes the management quite complex. So within the 12 nautical mile, you have the respective states' marine fisheries regulation acts. In the 12 to 200 nautical mile, a law is now being revised and is being added, is under discussion. Whereas there are other regulations which touch upon these areas like the Coast Guard Act, Merchant Shipping Act, Post Trust Act, Environmental Protection Act, Wildlife Protection Act, Biological Diversity Act, and more importantly, the Coastal Regulation Zone Notification. So all these many laws indicate a legal pluralism and it makes management quite complex. Some of the regulatory measures in vogue, we have two types, the input controls and the output controls. In input controls, we have vessel registration and fishing licenses, closed fishing season for fishing as well as trawl ban, closed fishing areas in terms of marine protected areas, mostly in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, gear specifications on size of gear and mesh size of nets, control over destructive fishing practices. And in output control, we have recently introduced the minimum legal size for commercially important species. Besides that, we have the protected species or endangered, threatened, and protected species under the Indian Wildlife Protection Act. In recent times, this is a title shown as Fishing for Catastrophe, where a large number of bycatch is taken by many of these gears, and it is going into the fish meal industry. As you have seen earlier, India's fish production is now dominated by aquaculture, particularly that of shrimp, and all the bycatch species that are caught are being converted to fish meal for aquaculture. So this has resulted in a tremendous impact on the ecology, and therefore the regulation on the minimum legal size came into existence. The bycatch species are commonly called as trash species, and now many of the fisheries are actually targeting these juveniles and other species of less edible value. So many of the states have now introduced minimum legal sizes for number of commercial species based on the recommendations from the science. So Kerala has, the state of Kerala has a rule change and strict enforcement in place. In Karnataka, 72 species are protected, Tamil Nadu 113, Andhra Pradesh 61, Maharashtra 48. All these have been recommended by the CMFRI, which is a major research institution advising the government. Besides this, there is also, because of the open access nature of the fisheries, there is overcapacity, and the overcapacity in fishing fleets is actually much against the FAO's Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries. This graph shows you the level of overcapacity in different maritime states of India among the different gears. And you can see the purple bars, which indicate the multi-day trawl net, which is the main culprit in having a large number of vessels above the optimum. So a large number of the states have high overcapacity. In order to regulate this, some of the states have introduced a moratorium on new fishing crafts for the next 10 years, registration of boat building yards so that the government is aware who is building boats, and only replacement is allowed, and there is a control on the effort as well. Another important change in the fisheries that has happened, management that has happened, is the introduction of co-management. Of course, throughout the world, co-management is seen as a way in which better management can be done. It recognizes fishermen participation in the decision-making bodies, and fishermen are empowered to become active members of the fisheries management team, balancing rights and responsibilities and working in partnership rather than antagonistically with the government. Yeah, the government of Kerala was the first to introduce this co-management in the country, and it has a three-tiered council management system. There is an apex state fisheries council, there is a district fisheries council, and village councils. So it works as an hierarchical system where the state fisheries council has the ultimate authority. The same has been proposed for the national level as well, these councils, although it's not adopted, but National Marine Fisheries Management Council has been proposed along with the regional councils. So it is proposed that this will be introduced in the country in the future. Besides, spatial management has also been proposed for the country, where the area is divided into different zones, ecological regions based on the oceanographic conditions and the fisheries. These are showing the zones of fisheries. So the eco labels of fishery certification, which is a step towards sustainable fisheries, has come into being because of the disappointment of regulatory measures to curb overfishing and to improve fishery sustainability. Many environmental groups have initiated moves to develop alternate market-based strategies for protecting marine life and promoting sustainability. These private market mechanisms are designed to influence the purchasing decision of consumers and the procurement policies of retailers selling fish and seafood products, as well as reward producers using responsible fishing practices. So eco labels have come into existence about 20 years ago. And one of the leading labels for eco label is the Marine Stewardship Council for wild caught fisheries. There is the Aquaculture Stewardship Council for culture fisheries or aquaculture species. Then there is the Best Aquaculture Practice, Dolphin Safe. There are many labels. And there is a body which overlooks all these. There is the GSSI, or the Global Sustainable Seafood Initiative. The MSC, which is the world's leading certification body for sustainable fisheries, has nearly 16 million tons out of the total 80 million global catch certified, which is an improvement of about 11%. The number of fisheries engaged in the MSC program is about 516, and about 55 countries are engaged. About 19% of the wild marine catch are engaged with MSC, either as fully certified or engaged in certification process. The number of products with the blue label is about 20,000 and its value is about 12.9 billion US dollars. So do Indian fisheries need certification? So in order to be competitive in global seafood trade, currently India's share of global seafood export is 4% and it's growing. India needs to be proactive on seafood eco-labeling and in future aim for MSC certification of its major globally traded fisheries. From 2010, CMFRI and the WWF have been working together to get Indian fisheries certified. In 2014, the short-neck clam, which is a small-scale clam fishery in Ashtamudi Lake of Kerala, became India's first MSC certified fisheries. It is currently past the certification date and is in the process of recertification. So what is the way forward? Accepting that maintaining fisheries in a sustainable manner is a necessity for steady and ongoing yields and employment from wild-caught fisheries in India. Accepting that the MSC is a global leader in sustainable fisheries certification with obvious market and trade benefits. The WWF India has been a prime mover for identifying certifiable fisheries in India, developing plans for its improvement so that it can be MSC certified. Fishery improvement projects are commonly used in many parts of the world to help fisheries meet the requirement of MSC certification. Currently, more than 12 fisheries in India are moving towards MSC certification after the Ashtamudi clam. Those with the black boxes are trawl-caught species, which are part of a multi-species spectrum in the trawl catch. They are mainly shrimp, cephalopods, and cephalopods. Other species are the threadfin bream, which is a major trawl-caught species. Then you have the gillnet-caught blue swimming crab, the gillnet-caught Indian oil sardine, trap-caught lobsters in Tamil Nadu, pollen line-caught skipjack tuna in Lakshadweep, and the trawl-caught whelk in Kollam of Kerala. This is the status of fisheries moving towards MSC certification. So you can see that some of the clients are the industry itself, that is the Crab Meat Processors Association for the blue swimming crab, the Seafood Export Association for trawl-caught shrimps and cephalopods, and also the deep sea shrimp, trawl-caught Japanese threadfin bream, and also the Department of Fisheries Kavaratti Lakshadweep for pollen line caught skipjack tuna. The assessment bodies have been global bodies, and funding has been obtained from the National Fisheries Institute, Crab Council USA, and of course the Seafood Export Association consortiums, and also WWF and the International Pollen Line Foundation. Some of the ratings, the gillnet-caught blue swimming crab has a good rating, and so also the shrimp and cephalopod trawl fisheries. The pollen line caught skipjack tuna has finished pre-assessment and also FIP development, and it is awaiting full assessment. Other fisheries interested to move towards certification are the gillnet-caught oil sardine in Kerala, the trawl-caught whelk in Kerala, and the trap-caught lobster in Tamil Nadu, and they're awaiting funders for moving towards certification. So to conclude my talk, in the last 10 years, since the MSC certification of the Ashtamudi short-neck clam, stakeholders have shown keen interest in making their fisheries sustainable. There have been improvements in fishery regulations and its enforcement in the light of the MSC standard requirements. India's National Policy on Marine Fisheries 2017 identifies eco-labeling as a major goal. Scientific research institutes have systematized their assessments of key fish stocks. Exporters have realized the necessity for sustainability of their fisheries for improving trade and have funded various certification initiatives. This is particularly laudable because it is the industry which is now driving the certification process. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this and also for your patient hearing. I look forward to interacting with you in the question session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sunil Mohamed. Now we have a discussion involving all the speakers of session 3. We have received a few questions from our audience. We have received a question from David. The pathway projects of Marine Stewardship Council, including mapping, pre-assessments, action plans, implementation, and full assessment aiming sustainability is quite laudable. Considering the Herculean task that it entails, should the reassessment period be enhanced from 5 years to 10 years? Can any speaker from the MSc panel discuss on this?
Perhaps I should make a start and then I might hand over to my colleague Edouard to pick that up as well. It is a big effort, and I think part of what's different about the pathway projects versus a lot of the normal certification side of the MSc program, if you like, is that it needs to be funded from somewhere. And in some cases, they've been funded through grant funding to the MSc that we've managed to use to apply pre-assessments and develop action plans. But beyond that, the fisheries stakeholders normally need to come together in some coordinated effort to roll out the actual improvement activities. And that is it is a lot of work. It depends on the state that the fisheries are in when they first embark on this, of course, but in most cases, it's a full FIP, or fishery improvement projects sequence that is followed. And we can't undermine the amount of work or underestimate the amount of work that goes into that. I think it's a bit separate, though, to say that would then impact on the duration of a subsequent fishery certificate. And there's a reason that fishery certificates do last for 5 years, and that's largely linked to the development of the MSc standards. So over time, as Edouard mentioned, the standard does evolve, and it evolves in line with the current general understanding of what sustainability looks like, what stakeholders expect of a sustainability certification. So when a fishery is certified, it needs to go through annual surveillance audits, and then after 5 years, it becomes recertified. And normally that would mean that it's recertified in line with a slightly updated version of the standard. So if we were to extend that period, we're dealing with a different issue, that is whether or not that fishery is still aligning with the current thinking around sustainability. So I think they're two different issues that you're asking about. Perhaps Edouard, do you want to add to that?
Well, I think you covered most of the answer I would have given, Mike. So nothing to add to this.
The next question is from Alice Anthony, is directed towards Mr. Edouard. Premium price is paid by consumers for sustainability labels. How does it really trickle down to the fishers and communities?
Thank you for the question. It's very, very good and important question, actually. What is important to note is that it's difficult to find a general case on price premiums. There are many cases actually where there is no real price premium for the consumers in the end. And when it's the case, it's very different from one fishery to the other. But in some cases, there are a price premium, but most of the benefits for fishery is also sometimes market access. Some markets are requesting very, very strongly products to be eco-labeled. And that's one of the big benefits, is to maintain these markets for fisheries or to gain new markets as well. So it's not always a price premium that we observe. And in the case of when there is a price premium, it's the MSC, I mean, doesn't have control on how the price is built through the whole chain. So it's really difficult to answer precisely to this question, because as I was telling you at the beginning, there is no general case. And one thing also to mention is that beyond price and markets, there are also other benefits that fisheries find when they get certified. And some of these benefits are very different, but in most cases, there is also one big benefit that they find is actually also an image premium, actually, to show, because fisheries in the world need to show that they are sustainable. So it's also a way to communicate to the consumers, but also to the outside world, that their operation is sustainable. So there is also an image premium, I think, that is really important to put in the benefits for fisheries, and also a way to collaborate more efficiently with stakeholders, because as we mentioned in the presentations, these assessments and all these FIPs, they really gather a very, very large set of stakeholders. So it brings this benefit of putting many different stakeholders, I mean, scientists, fisheries, oops, there is an echo, I don't know why, and scientists, NGOs, fishermen, market actors around the same table to talk about sustainability. And that's a great benefit that we observe when fisheries get certified. So yeah, price premium is important, but I really want to insist that it's not the only benefit that we observe with certified fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Edouard. Dr. Sunil Mohamed, in his talk, mentioned that 12 fisheries in India are moving towards MSc certifications. What is the anticipated time frame for completion of full assessment and obtaining MSc label for the Indian fisheries? It is a question asked by Pamela Christopher.
Thank you, Pamela, for this question. Yeah, so most of these 12 fisheries that have moved towards MSc certification have started the process in 2020 or late 2019. So we would expect the 5-year period to end by 2025. Most of the fisheries are on track with the improvements, and it is expected that we would really get into fully certified fisheries by 2025.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Michael, Mr. Edouard, and Dr. Sunil Mohamed for joining the discussion. That was quite an interactive session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosalind. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Welcome, sir. It's time for a break before session 4. The next session will be on international seafood market trends and analytics.
People have relied on the oceans as a source of food and for their livelihoods for thousands of years. As technology has advanced, we have become capable of fishing more intensively. So looking after the oceans and the resources they provide is more important now than ever before. If the oceans are to be healthy, productive, and full of fish in the future, we have to fish sustainably. Sustainable fishing reduces environmental impacts, leaves more fish in the sea, and harms fewer marine animals. Sustainable fisheries have good management practices. The Marine Stewardship Council standard allows fisheries to show that they are well managed and that they fish in a sustainable way. The MSc standard is open to all fisheries that would like to be recognized as sustainable. To be certified as sustainable, a fishery must be able to meet all three principles of the MSC standard. The fishery must leave enough fish in the sea so that stocks can reproduce and fishing can go on forever. Fishing operations need to be managed so that the wider marine environment, other plants, animals and habitat can flourish and support life. The fishery must have good management in place. The MSC uses its blue eco label to identify seafood that has come from sustainable fisheries certified to its standard. The eco label is already displayed on tens of thousands of products in over 100 countries around the world. Consumers who want to play their part in maintaining and improving the health of the oceans can look for and choose seafood with a distinctive blue MSC eco label. It is vital that we safeguard the ocean's resources and protect people's livelihoods for the future. To do this, we need to work together.
Welcome back. Now we have session 4 on international seafood market trends and analytics, presented by two speakers. I invite Visch, Managing Director, Seafood Tip, Netherlands, to give a session talk on the EU seafood market after COVID-19. Mr. Sander, over to you.
Thank you, Seafood eConnect and MAS for inviting us to this conference. My name is Sunil and I'm the Managing Director of Seafood Tip. Seafood Tip is a member-based platform providing intelligence on the seafood supply chain towards our members. Our aim is to increase the transparency within the sector, enabling people and companies to make more sustainable and profitable sourcing and purchasing decisions. Our members range throughout the value chain, from exporters and importers, financial institutions and investors. Seafood Tip is part of Kontali Analyse, based in Norway. Kontali is the leading intelligence provider for cold water species such as salmon and sea bass. Based on this joint intelligence, I will try to give some insights on the situation on the European seafood market, covering multiple species. Over to my presentation now. Thank you, Seafood eConnect and MAS for inviting us to this conference. My name is Sunil and I'm the Managing Director of Seafood Tip. Seafood Tip is a member-based platform providing intelligence on the seafood supply chain towards our members. Our aim is to increase the transparency within the sector, enabling people and companies to make more sustainable, profitable sourcing and purchasing decisions. Our members range throughout the value chain, from exporters, importers, retailers, investors, and financial institutions. Seafood Tip is part of Kontali Analyse, which is based in Norway. Kontali is the leading intelligence provider for cold water species such as salmon and sea bass. Based on this joint intelligence, I will try to give some insights on the situation on the European seafood market covering these species. Let's go over to my presentation now. The graph displays the percentage of vaccinated people in the EU, where the blue line displays the number of people who received one dose. The dark blue line shows the fully vaccinated people. It shows that the current vaccination rate is around 75%. And as a result, most countries have lifted the various measures which were in place before, such as closure of restaurants, no group meetings, and restrictions on tourism. While the food service sector has reopened again, the demand for seafood in the retail sector also remains strong. An ongoing trend within those sectors we see is the consumer preference for more convenient seafood products, as well as pre-packed products. While the demand for convenience food was already an existing trend, it has become stronger during COVID-19 and is there to stay. Prepacked products also have seen a rise as people were concerned with more sanitary issues regarding the fresh products and possible COVID-19 infections. This was especially the case for Southern Europe, where a lot of fish and seafood products are sold as fresh. Let's see what the developments were for some important species on the EU market, starting with salmon. The graph you see here shows the import volume and price of fresh Atlantic salmon from Norway into the EU on a weekly basis. What you see is that at the beginning of the year, the import prices for salmon from Norway were still on the low side. However, from March onwards, there's been a good progression in prices as food service reopened and the demand in Europe increased. During the first 7 months, exports from Norway to the EU increased by 12%, while imports from Latin American countries such as Chile reduced by 30%, as they were focusing on supplying to the US market. At the moment, the import prices are now at a similar level as during 2020, which shows that the harvest and demand are quite imbalanced, especially as the estimated production in Norway this year is 5% higher than during 2020. Looking forward, these prices might actually increase slightly toward the end of the year to meet the holiday demand. An important species we cover within seafood tip is shrimp. And there also the demand is very high at the moment within Europe, but also on a global level. With the food service reopening, persistent demand in the retail and the upcoming holiday seasons in major market, the demand for shrimp is very high. If we look at Europe, we see import volumes of Penaeus shrimp, which entails both Vanamai and monodon shrimp, has gone up by 19% during the first 7 months. While prices were relatively low during the first 6 months of the year, they have been rising over time. As Asian suppliers are facing difficulties sourcing and exporting shrimp, we see changes occurring in the suppliers to Europe. For instance, the imports from Ecuador grew consistently, but also from other Latin American countries, such as Venezuela. However, Asian countries, such as India, lost some market share as a result. Let's take a more precise look on both Southern Europe imports and Northwestern Europe. Southern Europe, which includes France, Spain, Greece, Italy, and Portugal, have seen relatively stable imports since March onward, opposed to the historical purchasing pattern, where we always see a dip during the summertime. The reason for these stable imports were the opening of the food service sector, but also the tourism during the summer times. As the inventory was low since the end of last year, buyers had to purchase a lot of products. What we have also seen is that during the first 6 months, the prices have been relatively low. Partly this was due to the fact that China was buying less shrimp. Countries such as Ecuador shipped more shrimp to the European Union. As of this moment, the processors in Southern Europe inform us that they have enough inventory for the holidays, but are still sourcing to meet the demand for the beginning of 2020. Furthermore, it's important for exporters and supplying countries to know that there are still 14,000 tons of shrimp volume available, which can be imported under the ATQ, autonomous tariff quota, and thus without a tariff. With increasing prices towards the end of the year, we might receive some extra imports under this ATQ in the last months of the year. While the total import volumes are lower for Northwestern countries, which you can see in the graph, we see basically a similar trend, stable imports and pricing during the first 7 months. Again, here also during the Q2, the imports were higher than usual, breaking from the historical pattern. Also here, buyers were replenishing inventory, supplying to both the food service and retail, keeping the import stables very high and much higher than usually see. However, at the moment, there's still a low inventory in Northwestern Europe, opposed to Southern Europe, and importers are looking for more material, which pushes the inter-EU trade, so the trade between countries within Europe, up as well. Availability is priority for importers, and with the issues on the logistical side, and consumers are afraid of missing out, and therefore looking for new sources for their products. As EU import data is always a little bit behind, we also take a look at UMOFA's data, which provides more later date details. The graph you see here are the EU imports from Ecuador on shrimp on a weekly basis. Looking forward, taking these graphs in mind, we see the demand remains strong during the second half of the year, but also that prices are increasing now, which is a result of the increased global demand. Both China and the US are also trying to secure more problems, combined with problems in the supplying countries from Asia due to COVID-19 and logistical issues. To understand these market demands for shrimp, we usually look at our farm gate price report, as they provide more up-to-date information. Graphs you see here come directly from our price portal, which is available to our members. They all display 30 count HOSO for different supplying countries to the EU. The first one, the top one, is Ecuador. And in Ecuador this year, we have seen that they have a good production. And with China being out of demand a little bit, they have really pushing products towards the EU and the US. However, at the moment, China is back in focus for exporters from Ecuador, which means prices are rising because the demand is up. Also, exporters from Ecuador are preferring to export to China because it's quite a simple product. It's the HOSO, a head-on, shell-on product, which costs less to process and it's more quickly to process as well. Another country important for especially Northwestern Europe is Vietnam. Vietnam has been struggling with COVID cases over the last month. And as a result, the government has applied some very strict measures on traveling, and that made sure that shrimp from the farm could not reach the processing industry. Also, the processing industry itself is reduced by 20 to 30% processing capacity. As a result, prices dropped within the country. At the moment, we see the restrictions being partially lifted. Prices are moving up. Still, some processors are still working on a low capacity and cannot cater into demand from both the US and the EU. The last country we look at is India. India had also some COVID struggles earlier this year, which as a result of that, they could not export both to the US and the EU. But now those restrictions have been lifted. However, the next harvest might be not before the end of the year, or just before the end of the year. So it might be difficult to supply to the markets. Also, due to the COVID issues, they have stocked quite late their ponds, which means if they harvest near the end of the year, they might have a lot of smaller sized shrimp available to the market. Another important species for the European market are sea bass and sea bream. This market is fed by production from the Mediterranean countries, such as Spain, Greece, and Italy, but also through Turkey. Last year, the sea bream market was impacted harsh by COVID-19, and a lot of fish was not harvested in Turkey. However, at the beginning of this year, this excess biomass was harvested and brought to market, reducing the price of sea bream, as shown in our index prices. However, over the summer, the export of bream has stagnated, pushing prices back up. Supply of bass remains relatively low from Turkey, which is an important supplier for the EU market, and as a result, the prices keep increasing. This low supply is partially compensated by Greece, which is harvesting a lot of biomass, which was not harvested last year. And the bass and bream of this year are especially the larger size classes, which also pushes up prices a little bit. A less data-related item, but very important, is the sustainable seafood development within Europe. And Europe has always been a key market for sustainable seafood. Companies in Northern Europe and North America began making commitments to source sustainable seafood in the early 2000s. And these commitments has expanded globally over time. Europe is home to the biggest concentration of certified products, and according to the global benchmark made by the Seafood Certification and Rating Collaboration, in 2019, more than 20,000 seafood products in Europe were certified and labeled. The Global Sustainable Seafood Initiative, GSSI in short, developed a global benchmark tool that provides formal recognition of seafood certification schemes which successfully compete in a rigorous and transparent benchmark process underpinned by the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries. As a result, we see a gradual shift from retailers committing to selling seafood with specific eco-labels, such as the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, ASC, and the Marine Stewardship Council, MSC, committed to selling seafood which has been benchmarked by the GSSI standards, including standards such as best aquaculture practices and global GAP. To illustrate this growth, I show you the graph number of seafood products which are ASC labeled within Europe. And we see a large part of the growth of ASC certified seafood was accounted for by Southern Europe. As shown in the graph, the number of ASC certified products on the Southern Europe market increased by 46% compared to the previous year. Let's see the outlook a little bit. As mentioned before, the vaccination rate in Europe is high. However, some measures are still in place, with certain sectors still working from home, for example. But overall, things have opened up, business is being resumed. Supply logistics within Europe are back on track, with eased travel restrictions for all modes of transport. With flights resuming, both within the EU but also from external countries, fresh products are easily brought into Europe again. However, logistics around transporting frozen products from Asia in particular remain a challenge. This is due to the global shortage of containers and high freight rates. As a result, we also observe increased intra-EU trade for these frozen products. Overall, important to realize that the economy in Europe is getting back on track sooner than expected. As the cold weather season and the winter is approaching, COVID-19 cases might increase again, which might impact the current measures again, which might become stricter again. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this presentation provided you some insights into the recent developments in the EU seafood market. If you have more questions or are interested in receiving up-to-date information on these species and this market, feel free to contact us directly. Our details you can find here. Thank you again, Seafood eConnect and MAS, for inviting us to this conference.
Thank you, Mr. Sander.
Hi there.
Now the session is open for discussion.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I cannot use the video system, but I can hear you quite clearly, so we use that way. I hope the presentation was information full on the European market. So if there are any questions, I'm here to help you.
Yes, we have received few questions from our audience. The first question is by Jibin Thomas from India. What trends offer opportunities or pose threats to the European fish and seafood market?
Yes, so one of the biggest things what we see happening is the demand for more convenience products, as I also told in the story. And there we see so importers, but also consumers want to have products which are easily possible to prepare. So there's an opportunity, and I think especially if we talk for India, to basically add value to their products. They have a lot of raw materials going to processing factories within Southern Europe, for instance, whether it be shrimp or whether it be mollusks such as squid and cuttlefish. It would be a good opportunity for India to try to add value within the country. A little bit of a threat for India is, of course, still the problems with EU border, especially for cultivated shrimp. So that's something to keep in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Sander.
Most welcome.
We'll start the next talk in a minute. I invite Mariana Toussaint, fishery expert, FAO, Rome, Italy, to give a session talk on international trade in the fisheries and aquaculture sector. Dr. Mariana, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, depending on where you are. My name is Mariana Toussaint, and I'm a fishery expert working in the Fisheries and Aquaculture Division at FAO. So I have prepared a presentation, so I'll share my screen. Just 1 minute, 1 second. No. Okay, here it is. No, sorry. Wait. Okay, here we are. I think now you can see my screen, or can I share my screen? I don't know if you can see my screen.
Yes, yes, Ms. Marine.
You can see. Okay. So I'll give a presentation. So first, I would like to thank organizers for inviting FAO to participate in this important international congress. So my presentation will be focused on international trade and markets of fisheries and aquaculture products by giving an overview of the sector. So most of the information and data presented here is based on the FAO publication, The State of World Fisheries and Aquaculture, which is commonly named as SOFIA. This is a very important publication as it contains the latest information and data of the sector. The SOFIA publication is a biannual publication, which is launched during the FAO Committee on Fisheries, which this committee is the world's largest forum to discuss policy issues related to fisheries and aquaculture matters. It is held every 2 years, where all FAO members and observers participate. The SOFIA publication is an enriching content publication where readers can find detailed information on production, trade consumption, regional data, and other useful information oriented to government and private policies of the fisheries and aquaculture sector. Also, SOFIA, the publication on SOFIA presents the challenges and problems faced by countries linked to the sector. In each edition, SOFIA has a main theme that runs throughout the entire publication, where in the last edition of SOFIA 2020, the main theme was sustainability in action. It highlights the importance, in this edition, it is highlighted the importance of the fisheries and aquaculture sector and its role to achieve particularly the Sustainable Development Goal, the SDG 14, that is related to the conservation and sustainable use of the oceans, sea, and marine resources for sustainable development. It is also highlighted in this edition. It is also highlighted the role of the sector that has in terms of food, nutrition, and employment. This publication is available in the 6 UN languages: English, French, Spanish, Russian, Arab, and Chinese. So having said that and moving on, here we have a very traditional graph presented by FAO at many events, where it represents how fish production has changed in the last decades. In 2018, the global fish production reached about 179 million tons. We can see that from one side, aquaculture became the main source of supply of fish for human consumption in 2014. That means that aquaculture is growing at an accelerated pace. And from the other side, capture fisheries have been relatively stable in recent decades. One of the main factors that explain this stability is exactly that the state of the fish stocks. Where here on this graph, we have the state of the world's fish stocks. This shows the historical situation from 1974 to 2017. We can clearly see that overfish stocks have been increasing in recent years. However, it is important to note that this is a global figure where the status of the different regions varies greatly. Another very important message here is that on many occasions, in general, newspaper and the media add overfish stocks with those of maximum sustainable yield. This is very important to note because this cannot be added or grouped because they are completely different in nature. Overfish is the situation that must be avoided or overcome through fishing regulations, where maximally sustainably fish is generally the aim of fisheries management. Said that, on this other graph, we can see how the situation of the different regional fish stocks varies enormously in different areas of the world. So here we have the percentages of overexploited stocks in relation to the total population. You can see, as I said, that there are some regions that they are doing great and then they are improving. Therefore, fish and fish products are very important products worldwide. The value of exports of fish and fish products is equivalent to the sum of exports of beef, pork, and poultry, as we can see in this image. Whereas the 37% of fish products goes into the international markets. Also, fish consumption worldwide has increased in recent years, where in 2017, fish consumption accounted for 17% of the global population's intake of animal proteins. So international trade is key. Sorry. International trade is key for the sector. As we can see, this image is very striking because it shows the international flow of fish and fish products worldwide. We can see that it is also globally inclusive because it involves developing and developed countries. Even the major fish producers are also major fish importers. It is impossible for a country to be self-sufficient in all the species of fish that the population of that country demands. So exporting fish and fish products is essential to the economies of many countries and regions. In 2019, world exports of fish and fish products, excluding aquatic plants, totaled $162 billion. This represents a 2.1% decrease on the record high reached in 2018. While the value of exports declined in 2019, the volumes traded in product weight continued to rise, leading to a decrease of the average unit value of fish and fish products world exports. Next. So what are the main importers and exporters worldwide? Well, we have this graph where we can see definitely that Asia plays an important role in world trade. China remained the largest exporter of fish and fish products in 2019, accounting for 12% of world exports by value, followed by Norway with 7% and Vietnam 5%. And then regarding the main importers, the US remained the largest importing country in 2019, accounting for 15% of world imports by value. China took over Japan as the second largest importing country, accounting for 11% of world imports by value. However, it is worth mentioning that when we consider the EU 2027 as a single market, it is by far the largest importer, accounting for 33% of world imports by value. So, and then what are the main fish products traded internationally? Well, we have salmon, shrimps, and tuna as one of the main groups of products traded worldwide. In 2019, fish, live, fresh, chilled, and frozen accounted for 46% of world exports by value, followed by crustaceans and mollusks, live, fresh, chilled, and frozen, 10%. Fish, prepared and preserved, accounted for 11%, and crustaceans and mollusks, prepared and preserved, 7%. Then, so I would like to share with you some projections. So looking ahead, some interesting perspectives from FAO. Here we have on this slide, but it should be noted that the implications of the pandemic should be taken into account when analyzing these projections and figures. Okay, so I'm gonna list three of the main projections. So aquaculture continues to play an important role in production, where aquaculture will overtake capture fisheries for all uses in 2022. Developing countries will continue to be major producers. And regarding international trade, we are going to have more importing countries that demand fish and fish products. So with that, I would like to finalize my presentation by stressing the importance of access to information in the fisheries and aquaculture sector, which is fundamental to reduce market inefficiencies. In this regard, FAO Glovefish is a multi-donor funded project within the Fisheries and Aquaculture Division in order to promote and facilitate information sharing with the industry, academia, and other stakeholders worldwide. Glovefish produce reports on fish analysis, trends, prices, and other related information. In addition, Glovefish is always ready to provide technical support for capacity building events, and other activities. I would like to share with you that one of the latest products that Glovefish has developed is the Glovefish market profile. This goes by countries. Then, for example, here we have Malaysia. So in this new section, we have that users can find interesting information about the country. For example, it starts with a country overview, which is an overview of the country. Then it goes into the fisheries profile that shows trade of fish and fish products of that country. It also shows the production and trade of that country, species, the import and export of the top 10 products of that particular country. So if you would like to become a Glovefish user and receive updated information such as the one that I just shared with you, You can register through this link, or you can scan the QR or send me an email, and then I can share with you the link. Then you just have to fill the registration form, this is completely free, as FAO believes that information is key and fundamental and should be available for everyone. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Mariana. Now the session is open for discussion. We have received few questions from our audience. First question is by Natasha Williams from UK. What is the current status of the global fisheries with respect to sustainability?
Well, I think it depends. The current status of what? Sorry, again.
What is the current status of the global fisheries with respect to sustainability?
Yeah, the global fisheries, depending on what, because fisheries encompasses production, trade, and fisheries management. So yeah, it's but I don't know what exactly does that mean.
Thank you, Mariana. We have one more question regarding trade status during COVID pandemic situation.
Can you repeat again the question, because it broke the
trade status during COVID pandemic situation?
Yeah, well, internationally, the pandemic brought a health crisis worldwide. So mainly the supply chain was disrupted by the pandemic, as everything was stopped or almost fully stopped. So what we can have from this experience from the pandemic is that the sector become more resilient. And for example, instead of having longer value chains, fish value chain, the supply of fish and fish products become shorter, and the value chain becomes shorter. So this made that, for example, fishermen just sold their products directly to the final to the final client or retailers. So yeah, basically this was one of the lessons learned for the sector, to become more resilient and to adapt and to try to have opportunities instead of problems.
Thank you, Dr. Mariana, for your explanation. No more questions in this session. Mars International would like to sincerely thank you for attending Seafood eConnect 2021 International Seafood Business Event. We hope that you find the conference informative and worthwhile. Your presence helped to make this event a great success. Sincere gratitude to our event sponsor, Marine Stewardship Council, for their complete support. Now, let us call it a day. Tomorrow, day 3, the final day of Seafood eConnect 2021, has 2 sessions. Transition in global fish segments to new consumer demands, and traceability for improved seafood safety. See you until then.
People have relied on the oceans as a source of food and for their livelihoods for thousands of years. As technology has advanced, we have become capable of fishing more intensively. So looking after the oceans and the resources they provide is more important now than ever before. If the oceans are to be healthy, productive, and full of fish in the future, we have to fish sustainably. Sustainable fishing reduces environmental impacts, leaves more fish in the sea, and harms fewer marine animals. Sustainable fisheries have good management practices. The Marine Stewardship Council standard allows fisheries to show that they are well managed and that they fish in a sustainable way. The MSC standard is open to all fisheries that would like to be recognized as sustainable. To be certified as sustainable, a fishery must be able to meet all three principles of the MSC standard. The fishery must leave enough fish in the sea so that stocks can reproduce and fishing can go on forever. Fishing operations need to be managed so that the wider marine environment, other plants, animals, and habitat can flourish and support life. The fishery must have good management in place. The MSC uses its blue eco-label to identify seafood that has come from sustainable fisheries certified to its standard. The eco-label is already displayed on tens of thousands of products in over 100 countries around the world. Consumers who want to play their part in maintaining and improving the health of the oceans can look for and choose seafood with a distinctive blue MSC eco-label. It is vital that we safeguard the ocean's resources and protect people's livelihoods for the future. To do this, we need to work together.